Great day, pre-calculus students. Today we get to go on and look at another conic section from chapter 10. Today we're going to look at section 10-4. We're going to focus on hyperbolas. And the big question we want to ask is, how do you solve problems involving hyperbolas? And how do you classify a conic section on the basis of its general equation? Now again, this second part, we've already talked about that. It always deals with the coefficient of the x squared and the coefficient of the y squared, which is the a and c respectively. And your a and c tells you a whole lot about the conic. And today's conic is the hyperbola. And the way that works is, if you were to classify it, you will notice that the a and the c have opposite signs. So one of them will be positive, the other one will be negative. All right, now this is very, very similar to ellipses. I thought I'd throw this at you guys. This here is a picture of a hyperbola. Again, these are the hyperbolas. It looks like two parabolas side by side, but this is an example of a hyperbola. Our goal in doing this problem is getting our hyperbola in this form. I'll show you that when we get to it. We're going to run across two different types of hyperbolas. The one that I have here, this one is a horizontal hyperbola. The other example is a vertical hyperbola. Now, to deal with this type of problem, we got to focus on getting it in this form. That's important. Once we get in this form, we can identify what our center is, which in this case, the center is HK, just like the HK of an ellipse, the HK of a parabola, which is the vertex. So your HK is going to be the center of your hyperbola. Everything is based upon from the center. The A units from the center gives you the coordinates of your vertexes. In this case, since there are two of them, they call them vertices. So if we know what our center is, and if we go A units to the right, or A units to the left, or if it's a vertical one, A units up, or A units down, that will give you the coordinates of your vertices. C units gives you the coordinates of your two focuses, which are called the foci, and you get that by using this formula here. Remember, these are a little bit different than the ellipses, so be very careful. There's a difference between the two. And the other one is B units, is used here for making this box. Now this box here is just an aid. It helps us determine these two asymptotes, which these two asymptotes will become plus or minus. In this case, if you apply, again, based upon the center being 0, your rise is B and your run is A, so it's plus or minus B over A. Okay, that is also shown in your book. Now, something else here to help you guys out, where the axis, or the line that goes through the foci and the vertices and through the center, this is called the major axis. And this is where the major axis is horizontal. Now, the line that is perpendicular to the major axis, that's called the conjugate axis. All right. Now, the way the problem is set up is going to tell you how, if your major axis is horizontal or vertical. Now, here, if it doesn't matter how it's set up, if your x squared term is a positive value, that number underneath there is always going to be the a squared. And that is the way this picture is set up. This is going to be a major axis of horizontal. Now, if you switch these signs, where this becomes negative x squared and this becomes positive y squared, that will take your major axis and make it vertical. All right? I think that will help you. I don't think there's any more to show you. Again, the hardest part of anything that we're doing is getting it in this form. That's going to be the hard part. Finding the HK, the coordinates of your vertices, the coordinates of your foci, finding your asymptotes. That's not going to be a difficult thing, because once you get it in this form, you can identify all those features. So with that said and done, let's just show some examples. Okay, I have two. Here is our first one. 9x squared minus 4y squared plus 8y minus 40 equals 0. All right, this is an equation of a conic. We see that A is 9 and C is negative 4. They have opposite signs, so this tells me that this is a hyperbola. All right, so what we got to do is we got to get it in this form. So we have to do a little bit of completing the square, which involves the box circle way of figuring out the completing the square. All right, first thing you want to do, this problem is setting it up by grouping together the x terms, and I grouped together the y terms, and then I added a 40 to both sides. So now we can go ahead and get into the completing the square part. First thing we do is factor out the coefficient of the x squared, which is 9. And I set this up because there's no other term in here, but I need this to be able to figure out what the h is. All right, the second part here is you factor out the coefficient of y squared, which is negative 4. Rewriting this to tie in to get it back to this. So negative 4 times y squared is negative 4y squared, and negative 4 times negative 2y is positive 8y. So all I did is a little application of distributivity. Circle. And then the right-hand side is the same thing. What we did on the left side, we got to do on the right side. So here, we take half of 0. Once again, we got to find out what goes in our square, what goes in our circle. That's the completing the square part. Take half the coefficient of x, half of that is 0, and you square it, you get 0. Take half of the coefficient of 2, that's 1. You square that, you get 1. So what goes in the box is 0. What goes in the circle is 4. Is 1. Sorry about that. And I've already did it for you. On the next part, all we got to do now is take this part and this part right here, put it into factored form, and then simplify the right side. Then we divide both sides by 36, so we can get it to equal 1. Remember now, ellipses and hyperbolas have got to equal 1. So I divide both sides by 36. So by dividing this side by 36, I get 4 and negative 9. Again, identification purposes, we know that a squared is 4, b squared is 9. And that tells us that a is plus or minus 2 and b is plus or minus 3. And also we can see up here is that h is 0 and k is 1. So that tells me this has a center at 0, 1. Now I didn't go into any more details on that. All I did next is I let you know that this transverse axis is horizontal because our first term here is an a squared. The second term is a negative value. So this right here, the way it's set up, is the major axis horizontal. So that is going to look like this form right here. And just for purposes of looking at this diagram, we have found our center to be 0, 1. Okay, so h is 0, y is 1. I'll just use this just briefly. And you can figure out your vertices now by taking and shifting it to figuring out that your x value is going to the right 2 units and going to the left 2 units. And again, you guys can figure that part out. That's the easy part. Getting it in this form, that's the most important thing. Once you get it in this form, it's all downhill after this, okay? All right, that is number 1. This one is a transverse axis that is horizontal. Let's do an example of one where the transverse axis is vertical, okay? All right, here we go. 4x squared minus 9y squared minus 24x minus 72y minus 72 equals 0. This is a conic. We see that A is 4. We see that C is -9. They have opposite signs, so we know it's a hyperbola. All right, the next thing we do is we group together our terms that have an x in it, group the terms that have a y in it. Please let me do all this work and you'll see the difference between number 2 and number 1. Okay, the next thing we do is the first one, we factor out the 4 from the x squared. Apply the box to this one for completing the square part. Factored out a -9 for the second grouping. And do the circle here. Now be very careful. This is the part where students will mess up. Remember now, if we do distributivity, -9 times +8 is -72. Okay? And what we do on the left side, we apply it to the right side. All right. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. All right. I didn't show that. Okay, well, let's just back that up. That is 9. And that's going to be 16. 9, 16. Again, now with this part right here, I know this can be factored out to be x minus 3 squared. In other words, what are the factors of 9 whose sum is -6? It's -3 and -3. Same thing on the other side. Simplify the right side, we get -36. Again, I just use my calculator to figure that out. You guys can do that. Divide everything by -36. And now if you look here, this problem here, we got a negative on this portion of the hyperbola. If I go ahead and flip it around, again, took the two terms and flipped them, you can do that, or just we commuted them by using the commutative property of addition. We can see now that a squared is 4, b squared is 9. That means a is plus or minus 2 and b is plus or minus 3. And then since this term, it starts off with y, that tells us our major axis is vertical. So again, if we go back to the diagram, your transverse axis is vertical. Here is your center. Based upon this problem, your center is, remember now, it's set up differently. It's x minus h, y minus k. So 3, -4 is your center. So I didn't write that down, but I thought, let's just do that right now. So the center of this problem right here will be 3, -4. You've got to be very careful on that part. This is not h, this is not k. It's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Or in this case, y plus k squared, or y minus k squared. Not thinking through here. All right, that is pretty much what a hyperbola is. Remember, the key is getting it in this form. Once you get it in the form here, you can pretty much tell what type of parabola is it. Is it a horizontal hyperbola? Is it a horizontal hyperbola, or is it a vertical hyperbola? And then from there, pretty much after that, you know what the center is, and you can figure out what the vertices are by using your value of A. You can figure out what your foci are based upon this formula right here. I don't think you guys are going to have any problems. So that pretty much, my lovely pre-calculus group, that is what section 10-4 is. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and the next video we're going to deal with is going to be after our test. Our next video will be about rotational conics. That one's a little bit more different than what we've been doing. So we'll do that one next week sometime. All right. Catch you later.